Hey guys, this is John. I hope you're all doing well. So, I don't often cover current events in the chess world, but I would love to do more of that going forward. And I thought today's video would present an excellent opportunity to kind of dive back into that. We had a record broken just a couple days ago in the chess world, and it's the record for the youngest player to defeat a grandmaster in a classical chess game. Youngest ever player to defeat a grandmaster in a classical chess game. We're talking long time control, not blitz, not rapid, certainly not bullet. No, a proper classical game, usually played at a time limit of game in 90 minutes or more per side. And the young man who accomplished this feat, his name is Ashwath Kaushik. He's pictured right here. Probably no surprise. And this young man is only 8 years old. Yes, we now officially have 8-year-olds, or a single 8-year-old rather, beating a grandmaster. Absolutely unbelievable. First of all, I want to say congratulations to him and his family, his coaches. What an amazing accomplishment. So well done, Ashwat. We'll get into the game in just a second. I'm currently on the website attackingchess.com. There's a nice article about Ashwat describing his chess career so far. Just so young still. We'll see what's to come for him. I imagine quite big things, but very very young person. It describes his training regimen. There's an interview with his father breaking down how he spends his time, the possible funding that he's looking for, all sorts of stuff. And I kind of only skimmed this article because I wanted to give myself as little information as possible about the game, which we'll see coming up here. But do take a look at this article. It looks really good. And it also gives another game of a Schwartz that we're not going to look at, but I'm sure is also instructive. So, yeah, 8 years old. And who did he defeat? He defeated Grandmaster Jacek Stopa from Poland, who's 37 years old. And this was at a tournament in Switzerland. Now, I have a funny kind of personal connection to this because I actually went to college with Jacek. I apologize in advance to you, Jacek. I don't mean to embarrass you with this video or anything. Yatsek's a great guy, so I'm sure he's going to take this in stride. But those are the participants in this game. So let's pop into the Lichess study that I have prepared for this. And this should be fun. So what I did is I grabbed the game, but I purposely didn't look at it. I didn't play till the end. I didn't run any computer analysis. I happen to see the first few moves, so I know what opening this is, but I wanted to give myself as little information as possible so you guys could hear my unfiltered thoughts about this game between 8-year-old Ashwath Kaushik, rated 1892 FIDE, and Grandmaster Jacek Stopa, rated 2351 FIDE. Now, I know Jacek's rating is below 2500, which is the traditional mark for a Grandmaster, but he has been in the middle 2500s. I think 2550-ish is his peak rating. I've lost to Jacek before in a classical game. I mean, he is a very serious and strong player. So let's get into this. So Ashwath has white, opens with e4. And by the way, on Lichess, if you ever want to go through a game without actually seeing the moves, you have to be able to upload something. So I did upload the PGN. You can click the little hamburger menu on the right-hand side, and it'll hide the moves for you. So e4, and Jacek plays the Pirtz, d6 on move 1, d4, knight f6, knight c3, and now e5. Okay, so Jacek with this move is offering a transition to a queenless middle game. White has the option of playing takes, takes, and queen takes d8. Looks like Ashwath does not go for that, though. He plays knight f3. So keeping the tension, adding another attacker to the e5 point. Jacek plays knight bd7, reinforcing. This is all theory so far. Not the normal course of a Pirtz game. Oftentimes black does not play this e5 move in transition to this. You're probably used to seeing a lot of Pirtz games with g6, but you can play it this way. I actually play this way sometimes myself with the black pieces. Okay, bishop c4, also a standard move. Bishop e7, black getting ready to castle. And now white plays castles. Yeah, so I remember as a kid, I once played the move bishop takes f7 check here as white. because that f7 square is definitely a focal point. But after king takes f7, knight g5 check, if black knows to play king g8, I want to say even king g6 might be playable, but especially king g8, black is better because although white can play knight e6, and this is the reason the black king had to avoid f8 or e8, those two would be disastrous. f8 would be a fork, and e8 would be a trap of the queen. Black can now play queen e8, and after knight takes c7, queen g6, yes, white can take the rook in the corner, but they have to allow queen takes g2, hitting the rook on h1, rook f1, and I believe e takes d4, queen takes d4, and now I want to say knight e5 is supposed to be very good for black, threatening knight f3 check. That's a big time fork. This light square bishop can also get in the game. White's knight on a7 is still kind of marooned. It's a messy position because black's king is also kind of awkward in blocking the rook, but black is better here. So that's one thing you learn for both colors, actually, in this line. If you're ever curious about that move, bishop takes f7 is not supposed to be good here. Also on knight g5, black can just castle and defend f7. So, okay, Ashwath castles, all normal stuff. I'm sure they're playing these moves quite fast. Yahtzee castles as well. And now h3. Okay, so yeah, a modest move, a move that's useful in the future, taking control of the g4 square. White is not committing to anything, very patient. Okay, c6. Yeah, that's a pretty standard move for black as well. Makes some room for the queen to get out. Also hints at the possibility of b5. And so, yeah, white does play a4, stopping the b5 move. And this is the customary reaction. So already, I mean, we're less than 10 moves into this game, but you can tell that for an 8-year-old, these moves h3, a4, white has positional understanding, provided they haven't just memorized this opening. But, you know, moves like this, h3, a4, I know as an 8-year-old myself, I learned the game when I was 8, and I was certainly nowhere close to being competitive strength. But these type of moves would have really baffled me at that age because they are space gaining prophylactic moves, especially this a4 move preventing black from playing b5. So already you can tell that white has a degree of understanding that for a lot of players his age, they would not possess. But very early still, this is all pretty normal. Yeah, black plays a5, useful move for black as well. Just in case white wants to advance a5, you put a stop to that. You can see both sides have control of respective b file squares, or at least they're disputing them. All right, rook e1. Yep, just get the rook into the game. h6. Now, I know from the black side, you can handle this type of setup in a number of ways. Sometimes black will go for b6 and bishop b7. I think that's a little more customary when the pawn is back on a7. Or a lot of times black actually combines b6 and a6, bishop b7, and then eventually tries to prosecute the b5 advance. You can play queen c7 pretty much anywhere. That's a really good square for the queen. It helps reinforce e5. Could be a prelude to black putting something on d8 as well, especially a rook. You can play rook e8 and try to go for knight f8 at some stage. You can take on d4. There's really a lot of different systems. And knowing Yahtzee, he has a very wide opening repertoire. He's a knowledgeable player in the opening, and he's actually quite tricky with the move orders that he selects. I know this from personal experience playing against him. So I wonder if he was kind of thinking, you know, I'm going to play like the old man chess against this young player, try to get them in some position that's super flexible and maybe look to outplay them with my experience. Just kind of speculating here. Because you saw earlier, he didn't mind going for the queenless middle game scenario way back when he played e5. White absolutely could have taken him up on that. But even with queens off the board, it's not like a strong player is instantly thinking a weaker player is going to be able to get a draw against them. Like, that's far from the case. So, all right. So we're in this position, rook e1, and h6 is played, covering g5. Yeah, probably that was the extent of the reasoning on that move, just to stop a piece from coming to g5, most likely the bishop. All right, and bishop a2. Yeah, so another prophylactic move just taking the bishop out of the way. I wonder if perhaps white is anticipating some sort of uh, takes and d5 idea at some point, or knight b6 hitting the bishop. Yeah, there could be a few different reasons why white might play such a move like that. It could be to free up the c4 square. I've seen that as a theme in some cases. So if white were to, let's say, trade on e5 and then maneuver the kingside knight via d2 to c4, that could also be legit. But okay, bishop a2. Yeah, I mean, not to harp on these sort of modest, semi-improving moves, but that's a great sign that an 8-year-old can even think to play moves like that. Recognizing that this position's a little more closed, has potential to become open, but definitely is on the slower side right now, with nothing having been exchanged. Okay, rook e8. Yeah, this frees up the f8 square. Bishop e3 developing. Bishop f8. Yep. I know in the past I've kind of struggled in these scenarios, also in the King's Indian sometimes, or old Indian type positions, like which piece to put on f8. Do you put the bishop there or the knight there? I think in this case, you can't really play knight f8 because white can take twice on e5. So bishop f8 makes sense. This could also be an introduction to playing g6 and bishop g7 too, trying to get the bishop on a slightly different track, being caddoed around the king. Again, I kind of wonder why Jacek is not going for queen c7, because I just think that's an all-purpose useful move. If, for example, black wants to play knight f8, queen c7 could be very useful in overprotecting that square and enabling that maneuver. Knight f8, knight g6, or knight f8 and maybe bishop e6, trying to contest the bishop. This move definitely comes to mind. But all right, bishop f8. Sorry, I'm not sure where to put my pointer. I'm like intentionally not putting it over here, but okay. Queen d2. And now queen c7. All right, both sides kind of jockeying for position with their queen. And now knight h4. Okay. So Ashwath sends the knight into the action, looking at f5, I suppose, mainly, but potentially the g6 square. I remember there is this bishop pinning the pawn on f7 from a distance. So, yeah, some nice optionality here. Doesn't play just the kind of expected move rook d1, right? You just played queen d2. Rook d1 would be entirely logical. Plays knight h4. Actually, I'm kind of reminded when I was a kid, there was a master locally here in Minnesota who gave me some useful piece of advice. He said, John, you're a good player. You often find good moves, but I've noticed you sometimes play the automatic move too often. And he specifically referenced like bringing a rook to a half open or open file as something I was doing just out of reflex, knowing that it's often recommended or it's often like the stock thing to do. But he kind of planted in my head at that time that, hey, like you don't always have to do that. And in fact, you can consider other ways of arranging your pieces that are maybe not as expected. So I'm really trying to approach this analysis from a clean standpoint without notion or hindsight of what's to come. And I just think it's very interesting some of these decisions that white is making that sort of belie this player's age. Knight h4, h3, a4, bishop a2. These are very sophisticated moves. So I'm impressed already. Knight h7. Okay. It's a bit of a bizarre looking move. Maybe it's to make way for the other knight to come here, or perhaps, flirting with knight g5 in the future. I don't see how that's going to work. I would imagine Jacek's playing that to get the other knight to f6. But yeah, it looks a little odd. I can't really think of another reason why I would do this. That being said, I'm not an expert on these structures whatsoever. So, although I've dabbled in them from the black side, I do not know their nuances. Okay, let's see how white responded. White goes for knight g6, so does not place the knight on f5. Yeah, maybe Ashwath was thinking that if knight f5, the other knight comes here, and then the bishop can look to eliminate the knight. So, okay, does play knight g6. And again, due to the pin on the black king, it appears like white is going to win at least the bishop pair in this position. Okay, e takes d4. Bishop takes d4. So black finally does give in and capture. Yeah, it's a little hard to free themselves otherwise. Again, black could maybe think about bringing the other knight here, but white always has the option of taking on e5 if they want. Okay, so let's see how black intends to break out of this. So e takes d4, bishop takes d4, knight c5. Stands to reason the knight's probably going to jump out once black has traded on d4. As black has a little more use of the fifth rank, a little more purchase there. So knight c5. White could take and double the pawns. I probably wouldn't rush that decision, though. Yeah, I'd be thinking about like the rook d1 move again. Maybe knight takes g6, knight takes f8 rather. But this bishop's also not running away anywhere. Let's see what white did. f4. Okay. Grabs some space. So this could be intending e5 at some point. Maybe hinting at f5 as well. Just a general space gaining move too. Influence squares on the fifth rank. Yeah, I like it. I like it. I think white's better here for sure. I don't know by how much, but looks nice for white. And I think as black, I'd be looking to trade pieces and try to simplify. Maybe like a bishop e6 type move at this point. Let's see. Yep, and that is what Jacek does. Bishop e6. Yeah, because trading this light square bishop would be really handy. Now black actually does threaten to take the knight. So I imagine Ashwath is going to take the bishop or take on f8 first. Let's see. Takes on f8. Okay, knight takes back. And then f5. f5. Yeah, so forces the issue when it comes to the bishop tension here. Is black going to take? Yes, black does take. All right, rook takes a2. Yeah, and it's nice that the pawn is on f5 now because it takes away the e6 square from black's knights. Also, black can't bounce back to the g6 square. You could argue that this pawn, in some cases, could be overextended. Like if the e4 pawn became weak and white really regretted the fact that they can't support it with like f3, that might be the case. But for now, yeah, I like this space advantage that white has. And again, white still has the option of taking on c5 if they ever want to double these pawns. Okay, f6. So black is really digging in here. Evidently, black was worried about e5 with a deflection idea. That's how I read that move, f6. In the long run, black would love to place a knight on e5 or maybe double their rooks and start hammering this e4 pawn. So let's see how white responds to that. Queen f4. All right, pretty apparent what white is threatening here. Bishop takes c5. Black would be unable to recapture because they lose their queen. So knight d7, black reinforces. Looks like a good move. Knight d1. Knight d1. Wow. Wait, let me think about this for a second. Okay, so, broadly, the knight does stand kind of poorly on c3 a lot of times because these squares are taken away by the black pawn on c6. And in this case, white is blocked by their own pawns coming to e4 and a4. So the knight doesn't have a lot of future where it stands on c3. So, yeah, I guess white is looking to reposition this knight. The most obvious route that comes to mind is knight f2, knight g4. Maybe looking towards this black king. This move does free up the third rank as well. Because I was wondering about this rook on a2. Like, that definitely kind of sticks out. White could consider rook a1, rook d1. But yeah, I mean, I would assume knight f2 is the main idea. Probably not knight e3 because that would leave the pawn on e4 undefended. But there is some possibility of lifting the rook now. Maybe in a perfect world, white does reorganize like this. Kind of shift over to the king side or this way. wherever it looks on the camera. Shift over to the king side and start trying to attack that black king. Yeah, really interesting move, knight d1. I'm not sure that move would have came so naturally to me. I don't know that I would have considered it, but it does make a good deal of sense. Because of all the pieces white has, I would say the knight on c3 and the rook on a2 are the ones that white needs to improve. Okay, well, I'll be curious where white goes with that. So knight d1, black occupies the e5 square. I mean, just eyeballing this, I would be fairly happy with how the past several moves have gone if I were playing black. Looks like black has got their knights into good position. They avoided any major problems on the king side. They're getting some squares to work with. Okay, and there's that rook a3 move. Yep. So that does appear to be on the agenda. I mean, where else would the rook go? I don't think you're really keen to go to e3 or b3. b3 is actually covered. But yeah, I would imagine rook g3 is just the idea here, which would threaten queen takes h6 if white could land that. Okay, king h7. So black already taking some measures against that. Knight f2. Get the knight off the back rank. Queen f7. Probably a general coordination move. Get the queen a little closer to the king to help out. Maybe helps prop up knight c4 if black ever wants to play that move. Okay, now g4. So white does not place the rook in front of the pawn, which would probably be somewhat of a dead end anyways. Ashwath signals that he wants to get his kingside pawns involved at this point. So g4, maybe long-term plan of h4, g5. Could throw in rook g3 thereafter, after playing like h4, for instance, to try to support g5. Maybe king g2, rook h1 as well. Okay, so clearly the king side is starting to become a front in the position. All right, queen c4 hits the bishop, maybe trying to force some sort of exchange. Also hits the pawn on c2. And queen d2. Huh. First thing that went through my mind when I saw that is knight f3 check. But remember that rook on a3 is holding that square. Queen d2. Okay, so white retreats the queen, wants to keep this bishop, doesn't acquiesce to a trade, which I think is smart because if you swap one of the knights off the board for your bishop, I think that takes a lot of the pressure off of white's position. You know, certainly if you take the knight on e5, I think rook takes e5 is almost an automatic move. Prelude to doubling, and white might not get this attack off the ground when there's all this heat coming down on the e4 pawn. Still looks a little unclear, but I don't think you want to give black the momentum to double their rooks like that. Likewise, if you take c5, I think black could conceivably take back either way. Don't know exactly which one I would prefer, but let's say even pawn takes, even voluntarily accepting the doubling. You keep the queen, attacking this pawn. Maybe the rook could be useful on the d file as well. One of the rooks coming there. Yeah, I think that's going to be kind of annoying for white to have to agree to a trade and then probably have to do something with the c pawn as well. If you play c3, the rook is cut off, so it doesn't look so appetizing. So queen d2, you know, it's hard to play moves like that sometimes when you're so focused and keen to attack. Playing a tactical retreat like that can be difficult to do. So again, I don't know how far into the game we are, but I think white is showing some good maturity here. b6. All right, so that reinforces the knight, but it also props up the pawn on a5. So I wonder if, well, I was about to say, I wonder if Jacek is trying to centralize the rook without losing the pawn on a5. But if black played something like rook d8, it's not like white can take right away anyways, because if queen takes d4. So, I don't know. It strikes me as a move that may not be necessary, but I could see it being useful too. Um, I guess for me, the jury's out on that move. And by the way, I definitely don't think black should go pawn hunting here. If you were wondering about knight takes a4, I think that's just going to run into b3 with the fork. Oh, no, maybe not, because there is this check. So, I guess at minimum, white can play rook a1. Is there b5? Because b3, still there's this check with the big time fork on the king and the queen. I don't know. Knight takes a4. Maybe that deserves some attention. No, here's what we do. We play bishop takes e5, and then whatever way black takes back. Then we play b3, because then there's no knight that can hop here. I think that's how we do it. Although, is there queen c3? Queen to c3? Hit the white queen. Certainly, black would be okay with a trade up a pawn. This is the challenge of doing a video where it's like guess the move style and you don't have just pre-prepared computer analysis. I like to challenge myself like this. It's way more interesting. And I do recommend, if you're reviewing a game, you're just watching a game casually, try to do it without looking at the engine. It's much more useful for your chess improvement. So I am not refuting this move on the spot. Originally, I thought it was this, but I think it must be something a little more sophisticated. This doesn't appear to work, right? I mean, I guess you could play rook a1 now. Not sure black is all that unhappy about this, though. Knight takes e4. I don't think black cares much. We'll check this after the game. We'll check this moment with the engine afterwards. I don't want to spend too much time, but I'm sure knight takes a4 is some sort of consideration. Maybe I'm missing something obvious here, though. But okay, black plays this b6 reinforcing move. King g2. Yeah, that looks handy. Now, any scenario with knight f3 is not going to fly. The king is also observing this square. Yeah, so now I think the knight takes a4 move definitely doesn't work. White could just play b3. There's no knight f3. So rook a7. Okay. Now, that move is certainly not an attempt to double on the a file. I imagine it's to swing the rook over to e7 or possibly a different square along the 7th rank. But yeah, just a way of potentially doubling. h4. Okay, so we had a bit of a pause while black was doing this whole queen c4 thing, and Ashwath retreated to d2 with the queen. But now he resumes the kingside assault. Clear idea of g5 on the horizon. And black goes d5. So Jacek, he's not going to just allow white to roll over him with this g5 move. He's applying the classical precept here that says if you're getting attacked on a flank, you should look for a counterattack in the center. So d5 attacking the e4 square. You know, I suppose white continuing to barrel forward here with g5 is critical. I don't think you really want to capture on d5 because black takes with check. I wouldn't really want to lose the time if I'm white. I wonder also, though, d5 did take away the queen's retreat. So is this queen starting to experience some problems? I mean, at b3, you can only go back to a6 or to b4. Kind of pushes the queen further away from the kingside action. So that's a consideration if white can start chasing this queen. I mean, b3, queen b4 looks a little annoying for white because it attacks the queen and the rook. Could you play queen c1 and keep an eye on the rook at that point? Okay, let's find out. Yeah, white does play b3. Queen b4, that's consistent. Yeah, because queen a6, really far away from the action. I think you're just encouraging white to come forward with these two major pieces over on the complete other side of the board. So queen b4 makes sense. Now, I think if white were to trade, I feel like black is pretty happy, right? If you trade, you hit the rook, let's say rook a1 or something, there might be some concrete issues for white with black like taking on e4 at that point because maybe g4 can hang in some cases. Oh, white does trade, actually. Okay. Yeah, I was wondering if white might go for this queen c1 move, which I think threatens pawn c3. Ah, no, they can't do that because it hangs the bishop. Yeah, queen takes d4 would be a problem. Okay, so Ashwath does actually trade queens. So we get a queen swap. Take rook a1. Yeah, now I wonder if the line I was just mentioning, where if black tries to like take and then deflect white's knight and go after g4, I wonder if that's just bad because of the shakiness of the queen side. The c5 square, the pawn on b6, the possibility of a5 in some cases to kind of destabilize here. Let's see what GM Stopa does. He does take on e4 with the pawn. And what are white's options here? There's knight takes e4. There's bishop takes c5. There's maybe a5. Maybe a5 is a move. It's a pretty thematic move because yeah, pawn takes loses the knight. If rook takes, we can trade rooks and then take on c5. If black doubles rooks after a5, I think white can actually just take on b6. Because in the event of a swap down on a1, I mean, at minimum, white can just take with the bishop. So, yeah, I think those would all be candidate moves for me here. The two captures, knight takes e4 and bishop takes c5, but also a5. Let's see what white does. Plays bishop takes c5, okay. Pawn takes, and now do you take with the rook or the knight on e4? Rook or knight? I guess knight takes e4 does not hang knight takes g4 because of the alignment of the rook's on the e file. So knight takes e4, knight takes g4, but actually has knight g5 check with the discovery. Rook takes e8 coming. So that's kind of appealing because if you can play knight takes e4, you can attack the pawn on c5. White does do that. Yeah, rook takes e4 looked a little slower. So I think this makes perfect sense. Are we going to see an endgame victory here? Like an endgame grind? Whoa, and black does play knight takes e4, or knight takes g4. Allowing knight g5. Really? Well, okay, when I see that move, my instinct isn't that Jacek blundered this. It's that he did that intentionally and he didn't like the alternatives. He didn't like defending this pawn passively with a move such as rook a5 or knight d7, which actually has similar issues. That's probably even worse. c4 probably also didn't like. Maybe white could just take in that case, or knight d6, or even g5. Yeah, so I just mentioned that because I think the temptation when you're watching a game online, or especially if there's any sort of eval swing, the intention is always like, oh, like this great player like just blundered. You know, they just didn't see it. A lot of times these are calculated decisions where they may not have had like a better practical option. So, I mean, I guess we'll see. I assume white played knight g5 here. Yep, white did. Knight takes c5 could be also an alternative, but probably unlikely. There's like knight e3 and stuff. So, you know, I wonder if the way that this went down, like d5 kind of kicked off this sequence. And I totally get Jacek's idea with that move, trying to counterattack in the center, anticipating white attacking over here. He wanted to create some counterplay. But I wonder if it's just the case that this position is much better for white if it's too shaky for black. Because black's coordination does look a little suspect to me with these kind of weak pawns. And the one thing black has going for them is the knight placement. But with bishop takes c5 and bishop takes e5 on the table, remember, like Ashwath kept that bishop for a very long time, didn't trade. Maybe it's just the case white's much better here. That's something we'll look at afterwards briefly. So, okay, so we had this sequence. Knight g5 check. Discovery on that rook. Black takes with the f pawn. Knight f6. Yeah, probably took with the f pawn to kind of keep the king safe, right? You take with the h pawn, I think the king gets exposed down the file. So knight f6 comes back. You could certainly think about taking on h4, but this is looking bleak for black, this endgame, because, if white's pawn were on a2 or something, if this were not already a protected pass pawn, perhaps black has some counterplay with the knight for the rook plus a pawn or maybe two pawns in some ideal scenario. But I think with this past protected a pawn and these weak c pawns, this is looking pretty bleak. I think, yeah, I think this is pretty much lost for black if white plays this right. But let's see what black does. Plays knight f6 first, so it doesn't take the pawn on h4. At least not yet. I wonder, pawn takes h4, what would white have done? King h3 perhaps, or rook e4, although rook e4 h5 could be played. Maybe just bring the other rook over and try to double and create a mating net. That's an idea. You can't play knight e3 check here because of the rook guards. Yeah, because this rook can very freely leave the a file. It's not needed to defend the a pawn. So maybe that's what Jacek was thinking, is that white could start creating some threats. Even if knight f6 here, yeah, this pawn on f5 guarding the g6 flight square is annoying. If black defends, then they're facing a mating net. If you play g6 or g5, then this is lights out. Yeah, so rook takes e8. I think clear long-term idea here with the a pawn, but also threats to black's king, even though black did take with the f pawn. In most simplified situations are going to be losing for black here. I think if a pair of rooks comes off the board, black's almost certainly going to be losing because the a pawn is going to be so fast. Knights are notoriously bad at stopping past pawns too. Keep that in mind. All right, so rook c8 moves the attacked rook, hits the c pawn. g4 does not take this. Yeah. Kind of wonder why. I mean, maybe just didn't like that this pawn wasn't so mobile. Maybe white could do the same thing. I feel like white can take this pawn pretty much whenever they want. Although here there is knight d5 threatening a fork. So I would imagine rook takes c6. But all right, plays g4. Yeah, could be the case that this pawn just doesn't matter too much. Rook takes c6, rook takes c5. If white can just wipe out the queenside pawns, I definitely don't think black having like two h pawns is going to matter much, with black being pretty uncoordinated and this pawn not being dangerous. So g4, rook takes c6, rook d7. Black desperately trying to create some counterplay here. I think the first thing you look at is, can white just play a5 in this position? White could try to play it safe somehow and maybe get this rook involved, like in the defense on the second rank. But yeah, I think a5 is the principal thing to do. I think rook takes c5 probably also makes some sense to guard the c2 pawn. Sometimes when you're converting a position that has been better for you for a long time, you can get too conservative in converting it. I've ran into this problem myself. I've struggled with this for many years, where you're trying to win like so cleanly that you don't allow any counterplay or even the perception of danger to creep in. Like, you don't want anything happening around your king. So you just move by move, like try to take away as much counterplay as possible. That's all well and good. But if you do that too much, it starts to work against you and you kind of like lose the threat of your own ideas and your own offensive threats. And you forget to actually try to win the game versus stopping your opponent from having counterplay. So this kind of strikes me as a moment where Ashwath might try to figure out, he's weighing those options, right? Like, do I play it safe and maybe try to get my rook defending on the second rank or near my king? I think that's probably not the thing to do because knight e4 looks like a good response, guarding the pawn and influencing the second rank. Or do I just kind of put my head down and say, you know what, I'm just going to play a5 and go do your thing. Rook d2 check, king g1. Yeah, you're probably going to try to bring your knight in, maybe push your pawn, but my a pawn's pretty fast, and you better weave a mating net real quickly or a perpetual net because I'm going to get a queen pretty soon if you don't. A matter of a few moves here. So I'm going to be really curious what he does. I mean, in some cases, it's kind of nice for white that rook takes f6 could be a bailout. I don't think white's going to need that, but it could be there if white wants it. Yeah, I think a5. I think a5 is probably the move. Rook d2 check, king g1, and then let's say knight e4, a6. I just don't see how black's really going to cause much trouble. g3, a7. Because black can't pivot the knight to g5 to play knight f3 check or anything with the h-pawn guarding. Knight f2, I guess, at that point. Maybe there's a little calculation needed, but I feel like some accurate move like rook g6 there. I know I'm showing a lot of moves, but I'm trying not to go ahead in the game. I feel like white's just going to shut it down. There we go. a5 played. Well done. Well done, young man. I like that. No fear. Rook d2 check. I'm just assuming this is correct. I mean, it's possible a5 is a mistake, but I don't think so. Okay, and yeah, no fear again. King g3. I mean, I was thinking king g1 just to keep the king away from the knight as much as possible. Maybe both are good, though. I mean, king g3. Yes, black has a couple ways they can check, but we're taking the pawn on g4 in either case. There's also king f4. So, yeah, that looks pretty good. And black doesn't have a lot of time to munch pawns because, again, you're going to die with a full stomach. If you go rook takes c2, rook c3 check, rook takes b3, white's going to be queening their pawn very quickly. And there's not going to be a mating net. So rook d4. So evidently trying to control the g4 pawn. Desperately trying to get in. I would assume knight h5 or maybe knight e4. Probably knight h5. But I think it's another one of these moments. I think you can just push now. I don't think knight h5, king f2, or king g2 even is going to amount to much. Now white plays the rook takes f6 move. Yeah, so I mentioned that a few moves back because I was wondering, is this just a safe way to try to completely rule out any rook knight coordination towards the king? And the timing looks really good on this, actually. Again, I would bet that white's winning with a6, but the timing looks really good in the sense that, yeah, and this all happened. After trade a6, we know black's going to have to come back with their rook. The rook's going to be completely passive, and white gets to pick up the g-pawn really easily. So if black doesn't resign here in the next move or two, maybe on this move, I think we're going to see rook d8, a7, rook a8, king takes g4. And then it's a matter of white putting black in zugzwang. Maybe white can bring their king up, although black can kind of bounce around here. Probably more likely white will just start walking in this direction and go after the c5 pawn. And black is really hard up to defend with the rook stuck on a8, with the white pawn on a7 supported by the rook. Let's see. Rook d8 played. Yep, a7, good technique. Threatened to make the promotion. Force black to play rook a8. This is why we like rooks behind passed pawns, folks. Reduces black's options here. They must play rook a8. Just scoop the pawn on g4 now. There you go. Black's going to play king g7. Yep, black does. Yeah, and now kind of an interesting little technical exercise. Assuredly a winning position for white. But the thing you don't want to do is play something like rook a5, king f7, rook takes c5, and allow rook takes a7. Maybe white can still win that position, but it would be really sloppy technique to do that, where you give up your greatest asset, which is this protected pass a pawn, just to trade pawns. No. Ashwath is too experienced for that at 8 years old. He knows that he has black completely under his thumb, so you can just maneuver your king in. And I think, like I was saying, bring the king up this way. I mean, let's do a little calculation. Black can't break through on the king side at all. So king f4, king f7, king e4, king e7, king d5. That's already over, right? Because you can't play rook c8 to defend the pawn. White will promote. If you check, white just takes on c5. I think white's just going to win both the queenside pawns. And then it's an overwhelming advantage. King f4 played. And I'm trying to go forward. That is the end of the game. Yeah, black resigned. Okay, you know what? That was a real technical game. I like how Ashwath played that game. Again, congratulations to him. That was a game I and many other players would be proud of. You know, when you think upset and you see, oh, like really young player beats experienced super strong player. Personally, I instantly think like tactical victory, or yeah, maybe some puzzle rush scenario, some blunder in a complicated position by the stronger player, maybe. 'Cause you kind of associate kids with being good at tactics and just calculating really well, which they are. But I am very impressed by the maturity of White's play. Those early decisions like H3, A4. You know, I know some of this might be opening prep. Possible he's looked at this before, but the totality of these little decisions, H3, A4, Bishop A2, uh, also, after playing Queen D2, the Knight H4 move, not even playing Rook D1, just the knee jerk Rook D1 centralization, but Knight H4, realizing that Black has some sensitivity around these squares. That is a theme in this opening, by the way, this Knight H4 move. And then even later, too, Knight D1, very impressive maneuver, multi-purpose move. Had in mind Knight F2, but also Rook A3 and swinging the Rook over. I think another move that impressed me was Queen D2. The maturity to uh, temporarily take the foot off the gas, not fixating on leaving the queen around the black king, but just withdrawing, defending the bishop, securing the knowledge that he had the f3 square covered, and that this move seemed to give black more problems, like keeping all his options open, the b3 idea. Now, having not looked at the engine, maybe our opinion of some of this will change. But yeah, like I think this looked very clean for white. I think probably the d5 move was pretty consequential. I think that's probably a mistake by black, unless black has something much better here. But this position, to me, already looks sketchy for black. If the concrete stuff that we were talking about doesn't work, like black winning the G pawn, as we saw in the game that ran into the E file situation. So I kind of think, yeah, this D5 position, maybe the B6 move. I didn't fully understand why black can't play this move. Knight takes A4. We'll check that with the engine. Again, possible I'm just missing a tactical complication here. Maybe it's just white playing H4 or something and continuing to attack. Maybe black didn't like this. But yeah, we'll give that a quick analysis with the engine. Yeah, really cool to see such a young player playing a complete game. You got tactics. Yeah, you had calculation involved, but a lot of positional maturity, a lot of strategic understanding that belies Ashwath's age. That's my take on this game, seeing it for the first time. Okay, let's check with the engine. I'm real curious. We're just going to do this real quick. Yeah, so this is all theory, all theoretical stuff. Sorry if my volume was kind of loud there with the moves. I'm going to turn that down a little bit. Yeah, Rook 8 or Bishop A2. I'm going to kind of ignore some of this stuff. Certain decisions I didn't quite understand, like Knight H7. That is one of the top moves, evidently, but maybe this is already uncomfortable for black. I mean, if you play this system, let me know what you think, like where Jacek might have gone wrong. I could try to speculate, but I feel like this video might go towards the hour mark if I do, or beyond. Yeah, Knight G6. I mean, it does feel at this point that white has a pretty nice advantage. Possibly H6 is a mistake. Again, I know that move like kind of appears standard, but I wonder if that was rushed because that was a springboard to playing this stuff. I should mention, like sometimes, yeah, so sometimes you have to be careful about the timing of Knight H4 because let's say white had rushed Knight H4 like at the moment black had played H6. Often there is this Knight takes E4 move with the queen and bishop discovering the knight on H4, right? So this may not work for white if they play it too quickly. But we noticed that white only played knight H4 once both the queen and the bishop had vacated this diagonal. So timing was just great. Okay, engine likes queen takes d4 here a little more, but still really nice advantage for white at this point. F4. Yeah, maybe not the best move, F4, but a lot of options here. I don't think this is easy to decide what to do. I mean, queen e3 certainly doesn't strike me as a intuitive move in this position. Knight takes f8. I kind of thought white can play that whenever they want. F4 does make sense to me. That's a human move, even if it's not in the top 5. Like I understand this move more than I do some of these other decisions, like bishop c4. I mean, I did feel like Yahtzee kind of stabilized things. We could see that the eval is trending down a little bit for white. But yeah, knight d1, super interesting move. Engine is not impressed, as is typical for engines. This is another thing. Like, if you immediately look at a game with engine analysis, kind of the magic of the game and the moment dissipates, or in some cases, like even evaporates completely. Yeah, I mean, knight d. Given what happened, I kind of like this maneuver by white. I'm biased by what happened in the game, but this looks annoying for black. Knight d1, rook a3, rook g3, knight f2. Like, you gotta. There's no more dangerous situation in chess than when you have a lower rated player coming at your king, right? When I'm playing lower rated players, I want my king to be safe the entire game. I don't care if they attack like an area of the board or I have to defend on some sort of wing opposite my king. If they're gunning for my king, I'm always going to be nervous because I know the stakes are high. One mistake and it could be game over. Does seem like black is fine here though. So where did black go astray? G4. All right. Yeah, again, a move that looks pretty human, pretty natural. Engine said Yahtzee responded correctly. Queen c4. Queen d2. Tough call here by white. You know, I was extolling the virtues of that move, but just on a quick engine analysis here, it doesn't think it's better than just taking on e5. But I did feel like that was sort of a momentum shifter for black. Like, I just don't know as white if I'd want to have to think about the defense of this e4 pawn all of a sudden and just the natural doubling that black gets here. So queen d2. Okay, so yeah, b6 gets I think a pretty clear question mark from the engine. I was wondering what the point of that move was. I couldn't refute knight takes a4. Queen d1. Wow. Don't think I would have considered that move. That's a tough one. Put the queen right back on the home square. But yeah, this looks to be a turning point too. Maybe even more so than d5. I guess we'll see. The engine actually wants black to go queen b4 right on this move. Right at this juncture. Before white plays the stabilizing b3 coming up, like after king g2 to control this square. Got it. Because, yeah, in this case, the a4 pawn might just drop on the next move. Like white moves the rook somewhere. Yeah, I guess that allows knight f3. So rook moves somewhere, and then you can take. And we're not scared of... Yeah, I guess we're not scared of c3 or bishop c3 again because of the knight check. Huh. So b6, king g2. It's also saying rook g3 is good here. Better than king g2. You know, it's not at all unexpected that the players are going to make some mistakes in these positions. Very tense, kind of semi-open game. I'd say mostly closed, but potential to become open with some pawn breaks. Yeah, rook a7, h4. Now white's in command again. d5. Okay, so this is the move I was skeptical of, just in light of what happened, almost seemingly by force. But the engine disagrees. It says d5 is black's best chance. So here, black should play queen a6. Queen b4, as played in the game, is plus 1.2. Queen a6 is plus 0.6. Yeah, that's such a hard move to play psychologically, though. I totally get why Jacek didn't play that move, because G5, like, I would be very concerned if we just flip this for a second. I would be very concerned about this. My king looks pretty lonely with the queen and the rook so far away, especially the queen. I mean, the rook might be able to help on the 7th rank. And it does look like advantage white here. So this would have been an uphill battle for black. But queen b4 takes, save the rook. And it does look like this is quite a bit better for white, if not technically winning. Takes, bishop takes. Yeah, black could also take this way, but I understand why black wouldn't want to do that and give white bishop takes b6 as an option. Even just getting the pawn back, guarding here, threatening this, threatening to take the knight and just play a much better rook ending. Yeah, something like this. This is probably only a scenario where white is ever going to win. Something like this. If you get into a pawn endgame out of this, definitely white's going to win. They're going to make a beeline to the e-pawn with their king. White has a better structure and a more active king. Yeah, I think at this point it's not out of the question that black is just technically lost. If black can save this, it's going to be by the skin of their teeth. Tough call here. Bishop takes c5 or knight takes e4. Kind of like what white did. I was also wondering about this a5 move. No, that runs into knight f3 with the fork. Yeah, and I suppose here you can take this one with check, huh? Or rook takes a1. And something's going to give here. Got it, got it. Okay, so important to eliminate this e-pawn soon. Yep, knight takes e4. Yeah, so here's where I was speculating maybe Jacek just didn't like his options. Because I think I mentioned both these moves. c4, rook a5. White is threatening knight takes c5. But yeah, I think they do look pretty unappetizing. Like rook a5 looks super passive. Doesn't interfere with white playing g5 even. C4 also looks like it could allow g5 or like a knight d6 move, or like I was saying, even takes, since black can't take back because of the discovery here. But maybe that's actually not the best move. Maybe black can come over and attack the rook. Okay, so it does appear knight takes g4 is a mistake. But again, from a human standpoint, I kind of get that. But maybe that was panicky. Maybe there's some time pressure creeping in. You never know. I don't think Jacek just missed knight g5. Like, that would not track to me. Yeah, Engine actually says h takes g5 is a slightly better chance for black here, but this is already +4, +3. G takes h4. White can play a5, or yeah, maybe. What about this move I was thinking of? h5. I guess try to come up here with the king. Also, there's this idea I should mention, like trying to bully black with a rook trade. That makes some sense too, because like I said, if the rooks come off the board, black's definitely going to lose. Okay. Yeah, g takes h4 doesn't appear like it's going to affect much. I think this is pretty similar. Whoops. That didn't happen, did it? g4, rook takes c6, rook d7. Yep, push the pawn. Check. I was saying king g1 here. Yeah, it looks like both are good. King g1, king g3. To me, yeah, rook takes f6. I just really like to see that move. That's nice. I kind of forgot about it. Like, I don't think I mentioned rook takes f6 before we proceeded here. But really nice, mature, technical move by white here. Just snuffing out any counterplay whatsoever for black when they have to go passive. And white knew that he was going to win at this point. Wow. So, yeah, congrats to Ashwath Kaushik, rated 1892 FIDE, 8 years old. I believe the article actually said that the previous record for the youngest player to defeat a Grandmaster was 11 years old. Again, I'll link to that article. You can check it out. So, quite the milestone. And I'm glad we were able to look at this game and challenge ourselves as well. You can always kind of play guess the move like this. And I encourage you to try to analyze without the use of the engine at least first, as much as you can. Like, try to draw your own conclusions. I really learned a lot from this game as an IM, and hope you enjoyed it as well. So let me know if you have any thoughts. Congrats again to Ashwath and his family. Sorry, Yatsik. It happens. Will we see a 7-year-old beat a grandmaster in a classical game anytime soon? I wouldn't completely doubt it. All right. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you later.